And I'll tell you why. You're all probably wondering what this hose is up here. I heard my wife talk to Loretta and say, I don't know what that hose is. Okay, so have you guys ever fallen off your bike or hurt yourself and got a big owie? Okay, so when I was a kid and that happened, my mom would have this can or spray can and spray it on there, and it would hurt like you wouldn't believe, but it was supposed to heal it. Nowadays, there's this little salve called triple antibiotic. It doesn't hurt at all. But do you know, long, long, long time ago, before your grandpa ever existed, people in ancient times, they believed that the saliva or spit from your mouth had healing properties. So, can you believe that? That it would heal you. So, there was this man who couldn't see at all in the Bible, okay? And he meets Jesus. And so pretend, if you will, I have dirt in a little pot, just like Jesus did. He had it on the ground. And Jesus spit into the dirt. And then he made the dirt into mud, kind of kneaded it like Nana kneads bread. And now, imagine, if you will, I'm putting this pretend mud on your face. Isn't your mom glad I didn't use real mud? Okay. And now, Jesus told this man, go wash in this pool, and he did. And he could suddenly see. So now I'm washing the mud off your face. Psst. Isn't pretend cool? But the man just did what Jesus said. And the man even said, he put mud on my eyes, he told me to wash, and now I can see. Simple trust in Jesus. Believing what Jesus has to say. Isn't that cool? That's all it takes. So anyway, have a good time in children's church, and I think even you got a little mud on your cheek. And I'm going to remember not to drink Dwayne's drink. Could be trouble. I would throw it at him. Yeah, so be like, hey, Dwayne, can you catch? Anyway, so before we walk into John 9, I have a few questions for y'all. Not the kind we say out loud, but the kind of questions we carry deep inside. The kind most people probably aren't going to voice in church. Like, why did this happen to me? Why didn't God stop it? Why do I have this in the wrong mode? Oh, there we go. So anyway, there's questions like, why didn't God stop this terrible thing? Or why does God feel silent when I need him most? Or why do some people get spared and others don't? These questions aren't theoretical. They show up in real life. A long time ago in college, my wife became friends with a woman named Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen had a rough road in life, more pain than most people should carry. But somewhere along the way, God began to steady her. She found herself at Oak Hills Bible College in Bemidji, Minnesota. She wasn't there long, but she made an impact. She touched lives, and people to this day remember her. And then tragically, Mary Ellen died far too young in a car crash. And when something like that happens, the questions come fast, don't they? Not sermon questions, real questions. Like, why her? Why now? Why would God allow that? What am I supposed to do with this kind of loss? Most of us don't say those things publicly. We bury them. We push them down. We tell ourselves, good Christians shouldn't think like that. But those questions are real. They come from deep pain. John 9 begins there. The disciples see a man born blind, and they ask the questions we all ask in different ways. Who sinned? This man or his parents? In other words, whose fault is it? And Jesus, he does something beautiful. He doesn't shame the question, he reframes it. You're looking for someone to blame, Jesus says, but this isn't about blame. This is about God's work. That's where we begin today, with questions we're afraid to ask, and a Savior who meets us in our grief, redirects our vision, and brings purpose and hope, even when we don't get the answers we want. So if you ever stood at the edge of loss asking why, John 9 is for you. Because Jesus doesn't just explain suffering, he steps into it and opens blind eyes. But first, let's read John 9, 1-5. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, It was not that this man had sinned or his parents, but the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it's day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So when early Christians heard this story, they recognized the disciples' questions as normal. In ancient culture, congenital disabilities were usually explained through blame. If someone was born blind, someone must have sinned. The child, the parents, or a previous generation. Suffering was treated like a moral scoreboard. So when the disciples ask who sinned, they aren't trying to be cruel. They're repeating the assumptions everyone carried. But Jesus shuts that whole framework down. He won't play the blame game. He won't turn this man into a religious debate. And he won't let suffering get wrapped up in a neat little explanation. He says, You're asking the wrong question. This isn't about who messed up. It's about what God is about to do in a world that is fallen and hurting. And to the original crowd, this would have landed like a shockwave. Jesus was taking apart a long-held belief and replacing it with a better one. God does not stand far from pain. He steps into it. We may not say it out loud, but we often think like the disciples, do we not? When hardship hits, we ask questions. What did I do wrong, God? Why are you punishing me? Why is this happening? We look for someone to blame, ourselves, others, even God. But Jesus changes our gaze. Not all suffering is tied to personal failure. Not every hardship is the direct result of sin. And God is not standing right over us, ready to strike us with every misstep. Instead, Jesus invites us to see pain through a different lens. God is present in suffering, working in ways we can't see. He's not the author of our brokenness, but the Redeemer who steps into it. That means your struggle is not evidence of God's absence. Your hardship isn't proof of God's anger. Your pain is not pointless. Jesus sees you not as a problem to fix, but as a person to love. In the places you feel most helpless, he's already at work. So when Jesus refuses the blame game, he's not just correcting their theology, he's redirecting their focus. Instead of getting stuck in the past, he points them to what God is doing right now. And that sets up the next movement. Suffering isn't a dead end. It can become a place where God's work is seen. To the first century audience, Jesus' words would have hit like a shockwave. In their world, suffering was usually read as punishment. But Jesus frames the man's blindness. He doesn't say God caused it. He doesn't say anyone deserved it. He doesn't even blame the parents. Instead, he says, this is the place where the works of God will be displayed. For them, that meant at least two things. Number one, God is not limited by human brokenness. What others may call a curse, Jesus treated as a stage for God's power. Number two, Jesus' mission is urgent. He uses the terms day and night. It signifies a window. While Jesus is in the world, that light is shining so bright. But when night comes, and night is when he is arrested and he is crucified on his cross, those public works will end. So they would have heard both a warning and an invitation. God is working through Jesus right now. Don't miss the moment. You know, sometimes we assume God works best through our strengths, our wins, our competence, our control. But Jesus teaches the opposite. God's glory often shines brightest where we feel most broken. So your weakness is never wasted. Your struggle is never sidelined. Your pain isn't pointless. God never needs perfect conditions to show his power. Like the Apostle Paul, he often uses the very things we wish he would remove. And we need to hear the urgency in the words that Jesus said. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is still day. In other words, don't wait to obey. Don't delay compassion. Don't postpone faithfulness. Don't assume you'll have more time. God is working right now, and he invites us to join him now. So Jesus corrected his disciples' assumptions, and he refrained the man's suffering. But he isn't finished. Next, he makes a bold claim about himself, the kind of claim that explains why he can bring meaning to suffering and turn darkness into sight. That leads us to the final movement of the first point. When Jesus said, while I'm in the world, I am the light of the world, the first audience would have heard more than a poetic line. They would have remembered the Feast of Tabernacles. Just picture it. Huge lamps blazed in the temple courts to picture God's guiding presence. They would have heard echoes of Isaiah's promise that the Messiah would be a light to the nations. In other words, Jesus was claiming to be God's presence, shining into human darkness. But here, the claim sharpens. Jesus is not only the light who guides, he is the light who gives sight. And he's about to prove it by opening the eyes of a man who had never seen light in his life. To them, that meant four things. Number one, Jesus fulfills Israel's hope. The promised light has arrived. Number two, Jesus brings revelation. Where he shines, truth becomes visible. Jesus' time is limited. While I'm in the world, signals urgency. And finally, number four, the miracle is a sign. Healing a man born blind isn't random kindness, it's a messianic demonstration. They would have understood. Only the true light of the world can open blind eyes, physically and spiritually. Oh man, we live in a world full of confusion. We live in a world of darkness, and we live in a world of spiritual blindness. People stumble through suffering, identity, purpose, and truth. Into that darkness, Jesus still says, I am the light of the world. That means Jesus is the only one who helps us see clearly. Without him, we misread pain, we misunderstand ourselves, and we misjudge God. Number two, Jesus brings clarity when we feel lost. He shines light on our questions, our wounds, and fears. Three, Jesus exposes what we'd rather hide. Ain't that the truth? Light reveals, and that can sting, but it's aimed at healing. Like ever since I had both my eyes taken care of and the cataracts gone, I keep seeing a messy kitchen. I keep trying to clean, and it like the dirt keeps reappearing. Before I couldn't see it, but that's what happens when Jesus shines into our life. You know, the first time you become a Christian, suddenly you see sins you never saw before. Suddenly you see yourself as broken. But that, my friends, is aimed at healing. Jesus gives us real sight, not just better vision, but new sight, truth that helps us see God, ourselves, and the world rightly. And like the blind man, we don't have to understand everything before we obey. We trust the one who sees us, knows us, and shines his light into our darkness. Years ago, my wife and son actually, were driving across the 35W bridge in Minnesota. It was an ordinary day. No warning signs, no uneasy feelings, no sense that anything was wrong. Just a mom and her son heading across a bridge they've drove thousands of times. A few hours later, that bridge collapsed into the Mississippi River. When the news broke, I remember like it's frozen in my memory. I honestly felt my stomach drop. I felt the blood drain from my face. And then it hit me with a force I can't describe. They were just on that bridge. Not days earlier, not weeks earlier, hours earlier. Later that night, I felt the overwhelming mixture of gratitude and fragility. Gratitude that they were safe, fragility because I knew how easily that story could have been different. And in moments like that, your mind goes to places you don't expect. You start asking questions you can't answer. Why were they spared? Why were others on the bridge the exact moment it collapsed? Why does suffering strike some and not others? But here's what God whispered in my heart in the middle of all that emotion. You don't have to understand the why to trust the who. I don't believe God caused the bridge to collapse, but I do believe he is present with every person on that bridge. It was my family hours before. I believe he was guiding, protecting, and working in ways we didn't even see. And that's exactly what Jesus is teaching in John 9. The disciples wanted to assign blame. Who sinned? Who caused this? But Jesus said, you're looking in the wrong direction. This isn't about blame. This is about God's work. Sometimes God's work looks like protection we didn't know we needed. Sometimes it looks like mercy we only recognize in hindsight. Sometimes it looks like God quietly steering us away from danger long before we ever knew it was there. That day when my wife and son crossed the bridge, at the moment I didn't see anything miraculous, but looking back, I could see God's hand all over it. And it reminds me that even when life feels fragile, even when we don't understand what's happening, Jesus sees us and he's already at work. With that, let's read John 9:16-17. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anoints the man's eyes with mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, Then how were your eyes opened? He answered, The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, Where is he? He said, I do not know. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees asked him again how he had received his sight. And he said to them, He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, How can a man who's a sinner do such things? And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, What do you say about him since he opened your eyes? He said, He is a prophet. This was a shocking way to heal somebody, wasn't it? To spit on mud or dirt and turn it into mud. But for the early Christians, this wouldn't have been shocking. It would have been deeply symbolic. Jesus doesn't simply speak or touch the man's eyes. Like I said, he spits on the ground, makes mud, and smears it on the man's face. To us, that sounds strange. To them, it carried meaning. Like I told the little kids, in the ancient world, saliva had healing power in the ancient world. And Jesus, he steps into the world using a familiar practice, but with divine authority. Second, kneading mud was counted as work under the Sabbath rules. So Jesus, I love this when he does this. Jesus does this to confront a system that prized regulation over restoration. But showing God's compassion isn't bound by tradition. And third, they use the word to anoint. And that would have stood out. Jesus isn't just applying mud, he's marking the man for a divine encounter. So then Jesus sends them to the pool of Siloam, connected to cleansing, worship, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And then you have the little note by John which said sent, which means pointing to Jesus, the one sent from the Father. The power isn't in the water, but in the one who sends him. And this is the most coolest thing. And the man obeys. No debate, no delay. He goes, he washes, and he sees. For the original readers and for us, this is a real picture of faith. Obedience before understanding. Trust before sight. We often want God to work in ways that feel clean, predictable, and comfortable. But Jesus brings sight through a messy, earthly, unexpected process, one that requires trust. That's often how God works in us. Sometimes the steps don't make sense. Sometimes obedience feels like walking blind towards something we can't yet see. But transformation begins with trust. We obey it first, and clarity comes later. And when Jesus opens our eyes, you can remember when Jesus first opened your eyes, everything shifted. Old labels lose their grip. Old limitations lose their power. Jesus creates sight where there was none, light where there was only darkness. And like this man, our obedience becomes a doorway to his testimony people can't dismiss. You know, early Christians, they would have felt immense tension right away. This man, born blind from birth, is now walking around with sight. And the people don't know what to do with him. His neighbors had passed him for years. They knew his voice. They knew his posture. They knew his begging spot was right over there. They thought they knew his story. But this change is so dramatic. They can't even agree on who he is. I mean, think about it. I had both cataracts done, right? there was a little blurriness. I'm imagining Jesus is doing this. This guy couldn't see at all, and now he can see. It is an amazing miracle. But because of this, they can't even agree on who he is. Some say, it's the man. No, it just looks like him. This language suggests an ongoing argument, questioning, doubting, debating. In the middle of all this confusion, the man speaks with calm clarity. I am the man. Okay, so I know he uses the word I am. It's not a divine claim, but it is a bold statement. My identity has been rewritten by what Jesus did. And they ask, how did this happen? A man called Jesus made mud, told me to wash, and now I see. Simple as that. No hype, no guessing, just truth. For the original hearers, this was a model of witness. Say what you know, tell what Jesus did, and let the changes speak. You know, I was just reading this morning about Moses. Moses was supposed to talk to the Pharaoh. And Moses says, I can't talk. I stutter. I don't know what to say. It's like, you don't need to be a preacher to be a witness for God. You just simply say what you know. Tell what Jesus did, and let others see the change. When Jesus changes their life, not everyone knows what to do with it. Some celebrate. Some question. Some doubt. Some even try to push you back into the old version of you, because your transformation totally messes them up. But this man shows something important. Your change never depends on everyone else's understanding. When Jesus opens your eyes, you are a new creation. Your story changes and your direction becomes clear, even if others are confused. But your testimony doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need perfect words. You say what you know. Jesus touched my life, and now I see. That kind of honesty unsettles people. In the best way, it creates holy curiosity. Think about it. It opens the doors for deeper conversations, and it points to the one who gives sight to the blind. For the early Christians, this would have felt tense. The neighbors bring this healed man to the Pharisees. Oh, not the Pharisees. We keep hearing about the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the ones most threatened by Jesus, and you bring him to them? And they shift the focus once again from the miracle to the Sabbath. Are you getting sick of the Pharisees? They don't ask what happened. They ask, how did Jesus do it? Not out of wonder, but they're going to build a case against Jesus, because Jesus healed on the Sabbath. How dare he heal on the Sabbath? He needed mud. That was work. Now the man stands before the leaders who care more about rules than restoration. He simply answers, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see. No spin, no extras, just truth. And that testimony splits the room. Some insist he can't be from God. He broke the Sabbath. Others push back. How can a sinner do this? Trapped between rigid tradition and undeniable evidence, they turn to the man. What do you say about him? His answer is awesome. He says he's a prophet. For the original hearers, this was powerful. An untrained, once marginalized man speaking with growing spiritual sight. The pressure rises, and so does his boldness. Not everyone celebrates when Jesus changes their life. Some resist what they can't control. Some cling to their categories. Some would rather argue about the how than face the who. And sometimes the loudest skepticism, unfortunately, comes from religious people. But this passage makes it plain. Opposition can't silence a real encounter with Jesus. When Jesus says, open your eyes, you don't need a title to speak. You don't need permission to testify. You don't need everyone to agree. You don't need to win an argument. You just tell the truth. I was blind and now I see. That testimony can't be shut down. And like this man, your courage grows as you keep speaking. Your clarity grows as you keep obeying. And your faith grows as you keep walking in the light. Now, sometime this year, we're going to have another game night. It's going to be this hymn thing again. And everybody's going to say, it's Fanny Crosby. She didn't write every single hymn, people. But let's learn about Fanny Crosby for a second. Fanny Crosby was blinded as a baby because of a medical mistake. And in the 1800s, being blind often meant being hidden. People assumed your life would be small, limited, and quiet. But Fanny's family refused that. Oh, they did something simple and faithful. Her grandmother taught her the Bible. They put God's word in her heart early. When the opportunity came, they sent her to a school for the blind in New York. Think about that. They didn't have a miracle in hand. They didn't know how the story would turn out. They just took the next obedient step. And over time, Jesus opened her eyes in a different way. Fanny grew into a woman with extraordinary spiritual sight. She began writing songs, thousands of them, and many have become some of the most loved hymns in the history of the church. Blessed assurance, to God be the glory. Pass me not, O gentle Savior. Her body never regained physical sight, but through obedience, God gave her a testimony that helped generations see Jesus more clearly. And that's the point. Jesus doesn't always open our eyes the way we expect. Sometimes he opens our eyes through a process, through small steps, through trust. And then he uses that changed life as a witness that people can't ignore. As we come to the end of the passage, whether you're sitting here in this room or joining us online from your living room, your car, your kitchen table, I want you to hear this clearly. John 9 is not just a story of a man born blind. It's the story of every person Jesus touches. Some of you today know exactly what it feels like to sit in darkness, to carry pain you didn't choose, to walk through seasons you don't understand, to ask questions that don't have easy answers. And Jesus meets you right there, not with blame, but with purpose. Some of you are in the middle of obedience, taking steps that don't make sense yet, trusting Jesus even when you don't see the whole picture. And Jesus honors that obedience. He uses it. He works through it. Some of you are experiencing real, slow, steady, ongoing changes. You're rebuilding your life. You're learning new patterns. You're walking in freedom. And the people around you don't always know what to do with the new you. But Jesus knows. He sees you. He knows you. And he is working in you. And here's a challenge for every single one of us, in person and online. If Jesus says, open your eyes, don't go back to living like you're still blind. Don't go back to the old patterns. Don't go back to the old tables. Don't go back to the old identity. Don't go back to the old darkness. Walk in the light you've been given. Obey the voice that called you. Tell the story only you can tell. You may not have all the answers. You still may be in the process. You may still be learning to see. But your testimony is powerful because it's real. I was blind and now I see. That's the story that changes families. That's the story that brings hope to the hurting. That's the story that shines light into the darkness. That's the story that points people to Jesus. So whether you're here in the sanctuary or watching from a million miles away, Jesus is asking you the same questions he asked the man at the end of this chapter. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Not just with your words, not just with your mind, but with obedience, with your courage, with your life. Because when Jesus opens your eyes, everything changes.